Completing and submitting timesheets in Time at Work is fairly straightforward. You'll log into the system, and in the To-Do panel, you'll see a summary of the timesheets that are either overdue, not overdue, or have been returned to you. This picture is a little more complex than it would normally be. In some circumstances, you may actually create a timesheet yourself, though generally the system will generate a weekly timesheet for you automatically at the beginning of every week. If you do want to create a timesheet, you'll click on Create Timesheet, and then you'll choose the week, usually a week in advance, because here we see that the first 3 timesheets for the year have either been returned, as in the first case, or created, as in the second and third case. But you might create a timesheet for the 4th week of the year in advance. Why might you do that? Well, perhaps if you're going on holiday and you want to fill in your timesheet in advance. But those are unusual circumstances. So typically, you will simply be opening the current timesheet or an overdue timesheet. Let's look at the timesheet that's overdue. In fact, when we click on this, we see all of the timesheets, whether they're the returned ones, the overdue ones, or the future ones. I'll open this overdue timesheet here. And the first thing you'll see is that the empty timesheet has already been filled in. That's because the 5 most recent combinations of project and task that you've reported time against will be automatically filled in for your convenience in the timesheet. That parameter of 5 is something that you can modify yourself, and I'll show you how that can be done later. Time is entered in Time at Work against clients, projects, and tasks. That's a 3-level hierarchy. But in fact, it's only at project level that you enter time in a timesheet. The client to which a project belongs is implied. But if you're starting with a completely empty timesheet, or if you want to add an extra row to this one, you would click on New Line. And this will give you a complete list of projects in the system. The system can be configured only to show you projects against which you're allowed to enter time, projects to which you're assigned. But in this case, in this configuration, you see all projects. There are a number of options here. You can search by project name, for example. If I put in 001 and search by project name, you'll see that we have a smaller list of projects here. You could search also by project code. You could look at the most recent projects that you've reported time against. Probably those have already been filled in, but if there are more than 5, then you might simply click here and see here only 5, the same 5 probably that we see in the pre-filled into the timesheet. You can also, if you want, start by selecting a client. If I click on this button here, we go up a level. I can choose a client, and then I can simply choose a project by clicking on the project. So now we have an extra row. This project requires tasks. In fact, it's the same project that you see on the 4th row of the timesheet, but let's select a different task in this case. Select task 3. Actually, that's the same one, so I'll choose a different one here. So here we have, in effect, selected client, project, and task. Obviously, for many projects, task is not required, as in those first 3 and this one here. What do you do next? Well, now you can enter time. You can enter time as the week unfolds. We could put in 4 hours administration and then say 3.5 hours here. And I can save that timesheet and come back to it later. You'll see that the system reports errors for Tuesday to Friday, and that's because we haven't entered standard hours for those days. Standard hours in this configuration of the system are 7.5 per working day. If I cancel now, you'll see that I can come back to that timesheet and the data will still be there. Of course, you can enter more than standard hours. We could put in 9 hours here. We could even put time in for the weekend. We can also enter notes. I can put something like specification work here, and that note will be recorded here. If we hover the cursor over, we'll see the note. You will have noticed also that there is a clock. If I click here, for example, start the clock running, I can continue with my work, and when it's completed I can click on OK, also add a note if necessary. But you'll notice that the time on the clock automatically rounds up to the nearest quarter of an hour in this case, because hours and a quarter is the granularity of this particular timesheet type. You have different timesheet types for different employees, and indeed different timesheet type for the entire system if you want. But in this configuration, it's an hour and a quarter, so you can enter 0.25 hours, and you can enter 0.5 hours, but you cannot, for example, enter 1.1 hours. You'll see the system rejects that as an invalid value. I'll put in 0.25 here, for example. And so it is only now a case of entering sufficient number of hours for the timesheet to be, from the system's point of view, valid. When I click on Save and Validate now, there are no error messages, and I can submit the timesheet. And that will go to this employee's line manager for authorization. And that brings us to another point. The authorizer may decide that he or she wants to challenge the timesheet in some way. In this particular configuration, he or she is unable to modify the timesheet itself, and if he or she wants changes to it, he or she must return it to you. Here we see a timesheet that's been returned, and if we open it, we'll see that the authorizer has entered a note saying, please clarify the administration hours reported on Tuesday. And so you might put something like filling timesheets, though we would hope that it would not take 4¼ hours, and then would resubmit that timesheet, and it will go to the authorizer again. So filling in timesheets is relatively straightforward, and the only thing that I want to say otherwise is that, as I mentioned, that parameter 5, which specifies the number of combinations of project and task that will be pre-filled into a timesheet, can be modified by you in My Details. So if you wanted, say, 10 instead of 5, then you would put 10 here and update this. And close. So that's how you will complete and submit timesheets.